We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
That's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey, welcome into a Tuesday edition of Finding Freedom. Lately, I've been, of course, doing these live streams with my guests on Thursdays, but this actually lines up really well this week. So I'll introduce my guest in just a minute. We're going to be talking about the Libertarian Convention. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump and a bunch of different things. But normally, Brian would be live streaming today. Turns out Brian had a dentist appointment, got a little drill into his tooth, and he can't live stream, so just kind of worked out naturally to put this out there today. I'll get to my guest in a minute here. I want to dedicate as much time as possible to talking with him. But before I do that, I just want to remind you, if you're watching somewhere right now, or if you're listening to this when it comes out in podcast form, please subscribe. I mean, you guys are veteran podcast listeners and watchers out there. You know how much it helps. So if you haven't already, please hit that button. It would really help us out with the old algorithms. All right, let's get into it today. Bringing on Jeremy Kaufman. Jeremy has been on Lions of Liberty before. He was on with Mark years ago. Actually, that was probably 2022. I think leading up to his Senate run there. And then he was on with Brian, I think previous to that, on Brian's show. So now he's on Finding Freedom. He's getting the full spectrum of Lions of Liberty treatment. And if you don't know Jeremy's an entrepreneur. He's a political activist. He's a great follow on Twitter if you're not following him. And he's here today. I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but I wanted to talk about the interactions that he had really with the Trump supporters at the convention. And then after the convention, he came out and said that he's supporting Donald Trump. So we'll get into that. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, and I'm glad to have now sampled every flavor of the Lions of Liberty. So it's a real joy.
Yeah, it's some interesting flavors. So we'll see which one's your favorite at the end of it. But just before we go any further here, for anyone out there who may be hearing your name, Jeremy Kaufman, who the heck is that? Give a real quick. Who are you? What are you all about?
Well, I guess I'm a New Hampshire maximalist libertarian. That's what I'm all about in terms of libertarianism. But I think I'm here as a libertarian. So I used to run the Free State Project. I was the Libertarian Party candidate for Senate. I have been involved in the libertarian movement, I would say, pretty actively for around 10 years. And I've been a libertarian my whole life. I was just undercover for the first decade of my adult life, and now I'm kind of very loud and proud, almost the exact opposite. And it was quite an interesting convention. I like to make some noise, and politics is theater. It's not about policy. A lot of libertarians wish it was about policy. I like policy. Politics is only kind of like a very little about that. And so that's what I did at the convention. I did a little bit of theater, and I think it's been working out. So
yeah, I'm glad you said that. I mean, I've been saying for a while, libertarians often say about like sports, that sports is the bread and circuses that distracts us. I think politics is the bread and circus that distracts us from the real tangible changes that are happening, that they're forcing upon us. But let's dig in a little bit into the Libertarian Convention, just to kind of get like your perspective on how things played out. So coming into the convention, there was all kinds of, people were going crazy that Donald Trump was going to be there, and RFK was going to be there. And it was, saying that it was taking focus off of, the business at hand and taking focus off of libertarian candidates. So what were your thoughts on that coming into the situation? Did you have a sense of temperature for how things were going to play out?
Well, I've always been. Of course, all skeptics believe they're realists. I've been skeptical, or I'd say realistic, about the opportunities for national liberty for a very long time. It's why my
Mhm.
first strategy was to do nothing, which I think is a very, very sound and smart
Yeah,
strategy, right? To do
not a bad
absolutely
strategy, really.
nothing. Yeah, it's a very logical strategy. Uh, uh, I did later, move to New Hampshire because I was like, why not give it a go? This like maybe this could actually work. So, as someone who's always been skeptical about national liberty, what I think Angela McArdle did with the Libertarian Party is probably the best thing you can achieve nationally. If you show that you're a real political bloc, you can get pandered to. Like you can get something. That's
Hmm.
actually the way that politics actually works. And it happens here in New Hampshire all the time because I think we attract more realistic libertarians and libertarians who are more realistic about power and how it works for better or worse. You can't get mad at nature. And so the sometimes that means you've got a coalition. In fact, usually it almost always means that. And so this is a chance for libertarians to potentially get something. So and I totally get the third party argument. Obviously, I've ran as a libertarian and asked for my vote. I asked for people to vote for me. But to me, if you're going to vote for a third party, you've got to get someone that you're really liking, that you're really saying, I
Hmm.
want to send the signal I don't see as a difference between these other two guys, and I really want this other, thing. So to me, that's the voting third party is something you can do, but it's something you actually shouldn't be doing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I've evolved big time in the way that I look at third parties, libertarian parties. Back in 2018, I helped to manage a Senate campaign here in Pennsylvania, where I am, and I was all in on thinking that we could, kind of work our way up, start with 3%, 5%, capture a bigger piece of the vote. You look at, places in Europe that have legitimate, third, fourth parties, but I think that in the United States, we're just not set up that way. I think for several different reasons, and it's really hard to transition. I think between our current duopoly, the lock that they have, and the corporations, they're happy with it. They know who they have to pay off. They don't have to pay off a third party or a fourth party. So I think it's hard. It's hard to probably impossible to break that at the federal level and get a third party in there. So that kind of takes us to Donald Trump coming to the Libertarian National Convention. There was Dave Smith who came out beforehand, and I wasn't there, but watching the video, Dave Smith came out beforehand and told the convention to, let's play nice here. Let's not be like crazy leftists screaming our heads off and not making any sense every time he opens his mouth. I guess first, what did you think of Dave saying that? Is that something? It doesn't seem like that's something you would agree with, since you were going out, being pretty, aggressive against the Trump people.
Well, look, I am never going to be a enthusiastic believer of everything that Donald Trump has done. I did vote for Donald Trump in 2020. I will say, partially because Joe Jorgensen, I think, actually, is a shockingly even better than James Oliver. But there are certain things that she did that I found like, look, I'm not gonna. I voted Libertarian for president 3 times in my life prior to 2020, but I'm not going to continue to do this if it's someone that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was hopeful that the Libertarian Party would nominate someone I could get behind a bit more. But also my personal agenda, and I'm open about this, is New Hampshire first. So how can New Hampshire represent their interests at the Libertarian? And there's a complete alignment among the Libertarian Party delegates from New Hampshire, right? Like everyone is considers themselves a free stater, and is very all in on the New Hampshire strategy. So what we want to do when we're there is, help is be building our own, movement. That's what we're, so that's what we're there to do. That's why I'm holding up a sign saying, MAGA equals socialist, because I knew it would get attention. It got even actually more attention than I knew. I'm being cocky and sometimes, but you take enough shots, and that was one that worked. and got in a little bit of a fight with some MAGA supporters. I mean, I may have been telling them that they weren't like smart enough to vote, and saying some provocative things. But I was just kind of going in there to also, so people say I will only say it online. They're wrong about that. I will do it in person. But,
yeah, you got to give me credit for that. I mean, it's if you're going to be an edgelord, you're not just edgelording on the internet. You're edgelording in real life.
Yeah. Well, I feel bad about it because there's a sense in which like I'm being kind of like instrumental about people. Like I don't think it's like wholly morally good to kind of behave that way. Because I am kind of looking at people and in a sense I'm being performative towards them, and using them as like to create a scene, that I'm partially enabling or whatever, manufacturing. You know what I mean? Not manufacturing in the sense that it wasn't real, like it did all actually happen, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. This is where I struggle because like I want to win. I'm a very competitive person. I like winning. I don't like cheating, but I am so very against cheating, but I like winning. And so it's a way. And so it's like, well, it worked. I don't know. Do you have some other way that I could have gotten, a bunch of attention that like was slightly better than that? Like I don't have one.
Yeah, showing charts and graphs really doesn't get the attention that libertarians think it does. But so, what did you think of Trump's overall address? I mean, obviously, the big thing or one of the big things coming out, saying that he's going to grant clemency to Ross Ulbricht, which is huge. Saying he put a libertarian in his cabinet. I've seen some people floating around, maybe Jeremy Kaufman for SEC chairman. So what do you think of that?
I think that last option would be incredible, but is also incredibly unlikely. Basically zero would be someone, but some sort of I do think there's some possibility that you would end up with some, who knows, but some percentage of something, is again better than nothing, which are the other options. At least he's saying it. At least he's pandering. And so, the more that becomes something that you even have to do. Like we had this debate in our own community in New Hampshire about having Vivek and even more so RFK, because I think Vivek is like basically under the libertarian umbrella. But about having them come to Porkfest in New Hampshire. Right. And to me, it's like, if you can, partially it's about how it's perceived and presented, but if it's them coming to kiss the ring or to court you, if they feel that they have to pander to you, that is a demonstration of your own power and influence, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not, someone coming and speaking to you and pitching to you is not an endorsement of their entire agenda. And someone speaking at an event should never be construed as such. So I think the fact that libertarians are a group that is torn, can be torn between voting Democrat and Republican, although they do mostly vote Republican when they don't vote third party or when they vote. And but look, you know what? If Trump also believes that libertarians are like losing him elections and he needs to win them, who cares if that's true? Like, yeah, that's totally true. Like, that's the most true thing I've ever heard. Yeah, libertarians are losing Donald Trump elections, and if Donald Trump doesn't win over the libertarians and give them things, then he's going to continue to lose. Like, what a great narrative to have out there. So 100%. No, I don't think yeah. So like, no, Trump is not a libertarian. Will you actually get someone who's like genuinely a libertarian in the cabinet, or some Trump version of what he thinks a libertarian is? That's probably up in the air. But you might get something, and you have Vivek. I think is one of the biggest reasons as well to think that you might get something if Vivek has Trump's ear in terms of appointments, and if Vivek can make the case to Trump that the libertarians, came around. Trump is someone who has probably very much a patronage model of power. And so if Trump feels that you delivered for him, the idea that he would give them something, and so if Vivek is that instrument on behalf of libertarianism, and the case can be made to Trump, and Vivek can say, hey, let's do this, let's do that, let's appoint, these people. that doesn't seem, that doesn't seem impossible. I'm not gonna say that's 100%, even if Trump wins, but that seems like maybe something that could happen, and that seems like maybe something good that could happen over like bad thing and impossible and possibly also bad thing. So, especially if you're already voting, vote for Trump. I think that's what you do, and I'll be voting anyway. That's the thing. Like, if you're in New Hampshire specifically, and I would hope, if wherever you're living, there's at least someone you feel represents you a little bit. And because once you're already in there, I do believe if you're already in there voting, you should vote for. Abstaining entirely, I think, is almost never correct, because at least you can train the system a little bit to be a little bit more. I don't see how abstaining is really sending a message.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I've gone through my different phases with how I view voting, and I was definitely in an abstaining part for a while. We're saying that we should just sit back and send a message. I don't think it sends any message at all. I mean, they're going to cater. They're going to pander to the people that are actually going to the polls and voting. Those are the people who are, in a way, with that vote, giving them, a small amount of the power. Of course, a lot of it is coming from the corporations and all of those mechanisms. But one thing I did want to touch on is Trump has kind of an example on the world stage of a rock star libertarian, and we could debate if he's really a libertarian or not, but in Argentina, Javier Milei, Trump has seen this guy kind of rise up, win an election, start cutting his government, and bring inflation down. And there was a recent interview with Trump, which I haven't watched or listened to the whole thing, but I did read the cliff notes, as you do on Twitter, and Trump was kind of talking about, at the beginning of the interview, he was patting himself on the back, as Trump does, saying that, if he hadn't come out with the CARES Act and pumped all this money into the economy with COVID, would have gotten into a depression. Then at the end of the interview, he's saying we need to cut the Department of Education. We need to cut this in order to stave off the inflation. And to your point with having Vivek in there, he really needs someone in there like Vivek, if it's possible, maybe it's not even possible, to try to guide him like, hey man, if you want to be like Javier Milei, you got to do it this way and this way and this way. And actually what you did with pumping all the money in, all the spending, that was actually bad. That's actually why we have the inflation.
Yeah. Well, I actually think Trump's psychology is such that you could never, ever, literally ever get him to admit that anything he has done was a mistake or was bad. But what you could do is convince him that this other thing should be done this time. He's someone who probably, it's such an interesting psychological type. I suspect there's like very little even attempt at maintaining internal coherence, which is like kind of the opposite of the way that a lot of libertarians are wired, where they like want every aspect of their ideology to and everything about everything to be like this like completely systematically perfect thing. But someone like him, he's just not, he's an incredible entertainer, 99th percentile entertainer. Part of being an entertainer is you're incredibly good at reading the pulse of crowds and people. And so this is largely a lot of just everything. I mean, he has a vibe and read again of people generally that is, through off the charts. And so this is how he develops his positions, and he, as much as anything, I'm not saying he doesn't have some native disposition as well. He clearly does. He is also very natively disposed towards being very dominant and wanting to be the most dominant person in any situation. And this is what leads to ideological incoherency, because he prefers dominance and following crowds to being coherent. And the following, and you'll see these impulses at odds in him, where his personal impulse, because he's in the psychological aspect of being more on the dominance hierarchy, was like very against overly being caring and concerning over COVID. Like essentially, like, even if it was real, let the weak die. Let's not hold back the strong. That's what sort of his native does, because someone who's dominant has that native disposition. But then his other aspect of his disposition, which is, I can read the vibe of people, and the people are terrified, right? And he had both of these in, right? And so I think at times he did, and this is not an excuse. I don't approve of how Trump handled COVID in the slightest. So this is not me going around on some apology tour for him. Not interested in doing that. But I think that just if you're genuinely trying to read the person, I do think that those were in conflict, and you could see both sides. And he did ultimately go with, do things that the public would want and prefer at times. And then once he's done those things, never ever going to admit it was a mistake. Never ever, no chance. If you're holding out a hope on that, you're never going to get it.
Oh, he's never admitted. I can't think of a single time he's ever admitted he's done anything wrong. Which there is a persuasive, tact to that. I mean, I don't think I wouldn't recommend anyone try to live their life that way. There's very few people that can get away with it. And, you could say Donald Trump's getting away with it, but he's really not, because half the people hate him and maybe 20% of the people are obsessed with him, and the rest of the people just see him for what he is. But so let's kind of break this down, I guess, between a Donald Trump, between a Chase Oliver option, and between an RFK, because I don't think anyone listening to this show is even thinking about Joe Biden. If you are watching this or listening to this thinking about Joe Biden, I don't know what to tell you.
You ain't liberty.
So between those three, this kind of breakdown. I mean, I think you've made it clear that you think Trump is the best option, but between the three, kind of, who's the worst, who's in the middle there?
Well, I don't get the RFK vote at all, really. So maybe someone would have to make the case for it for me to respond to it. I mean, because you're just kind of splitting the difference there. You either vote purist, whoever you feel is purist to your ideals, to keep the signal alive. But then that person needs to match the purity of your ideals. It needs to be someone you want more of as a candidate representing your ideals. And that's essentially the test, actually. I think because if the Libertarian Party exists, it needs to represent your ideals. Does this candidate represent the ideals in the way that you want? That's why I couldn't vote for Joe, right? And that's why I can't vote for Chase. Trump can actually win. So that's where you get you realistically get something. RFK can't win. I mean, look, if there's some poll the day before, if the betting markets have RFK at 30% the day before, if something changes such that it's actually maybe, but I don't think so. And I will say, I took one of those. I don't know if
Joe Biden, something that could actually happen. I don't even know what would happen if this was the case. What if Joe Biden dies after the Democratic convention? Can they still go back and put another candidate in time?
I believe there is some mechanism that allows for them not to just lose, but I don't claim to understand it or be able to explain it. So maybe it doesn't exist, but I think it does. I would bet right now that it does. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you can talk about scenarios like that, but I just think I think RFK just has no shot. And I did take one of these third party, rate your positions. And I got 95% with Rechtenwald. So that's where I am as a libertarian. It had Trump for me at 75, had Biden at 13, and it had RFK at 25. So I don't know, RFK, at least, and maybe they have RFK's positions wrong. I don't really claim to pay that much attention to what he says. There's other things about him that have caused me to not like him and kind of write him off. I don't want to drag. I've gathered there are some people I like who see something in RFK. So it continues to confuse me a little bit personally, but I don't want to, necessarily drag someone too much that some of these people seem to see something in, but I just don't see it at all.
Yeah. I mean, initially what I saw in RFK initially was obviously he's been very good on the Ukraine-Russian conflict. He's lost a lot of credibility in his anti-war department, obviously, with his stance on the Israel conflict. It's kind of like, if you understand what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, then you understand what's happening with Israel too. So you're outright just lying to us now. So that was kind of a breaking point for me. And I think Dave Smith, when he debated him, he laid that out pretty well. But I mean, RFK is good on a central bank digital currency, which I think is pretty important. I don't know if it's as important as I thought it was, maybe even 6 months ago. On guns, who knows where he really stands with his obsession with climate change and that. I think COVID, the lockdown response kind of changed his view on climate change. He's had some crazy views before where he wanted to lock climate deniers in prison or something. So I don't know. The thing about RFK, which is kind of weird to say as a libertarian, you're just talking about how principled libertarians are, and almost to a fault, to like a dogmatic fault. The thing about RFK is he seems to be willing to listen and change his mind, at least in many areas, which is a rare thing for a politician. So there's that. I'd rather have RFK than Joe Biden, for sure, obviously. But when you get into Chase isn't going to win, but RFK or Chase, I don't know.
I think RFK's chance within the Democratic primary, and it's passed. Look, I think if the Democratic Party could move in RFK's direction, I think that's clearly good. RFK does the time, but to me, RFK is another one of these people where I actually do put him in a Trump-esque category, where I think it's like partially their crowd following, rather than having that many sincere positions. Like, there really are just and you could argue this makes them very good politicians, because they're being political entrepreneurs. They're following the market, what the political market wants, and for better or worse, that's what makes both of them good at it, and that's why you see little internal ideological consistency in them, because it's just not there, and that's why their positions can drift and be so inconsistent and incoherent and seem to change all the time. And so you when you're getting someone like that, you're getting someone who can actually potentially fulfill. I'm not saying they can't fulfill it, but it's like they also need to. You've got to keep them trained, and you've got to keep their attention on it, because it's not something within them. Where someone like a Millet, it's within him, right? He pushes it, he exudes it, I think, is my impression. And so he isn't. You have less of a. It's not him serving the people; it's him persuading the people, and and performing the very rare task of, I guess, actually winning them over. So that's the way that I would read that.
Yeah. With RFK, there is a chance, a likelihood that someone could get in his ear, and then you end up with John McCain. So.
Yeah, you could get anything. Like, yeah. Well, same with Trump. Like, it's like, who knows who knows what you get on the other side of that? Like, again, you might get a vengeful, experienced Trump who actually does something about something. You might get John Bolton again, or like whoever the retread is. You would hope again. Like, you hope that, like, surely this time he's like, oh yeah, maybe it's well, I don't know. If you had it handy, but we were talking about it beforehand about that graphic about how.
Let's bring that up. So I hadn't seen this before, and I'll post this graphic on the show notes page, or you can just come watch the video here, right about almost 28 minutes in. So explain this graphic here that I've pulled up.
So I don't know where this came from. I associate this in my head as like a very old sort of meme. This is something I felt like maybe like a decade ago. I don't know. I have like an elephants category for memes. That's why I'm such a good poster, and so it's like, I thought this is like that old graphic, and so I went and just looked it up and found it, and it's kind it's kind of funny. It gets to the heart of how some people change. Libertarian has kids, they start thinking. One of the most libertarian guys I ever met, who ultimately said he considered himself a conservative and not a libertarian. And this was the answer he gave me. I said, well, why do you consider, he likes all the libertarian literature. He's like a smart computer scientist. And I said, well, ultimately, why do you consider yourself a conservative and not a libertarian? And he said, because I think the locus of society is the family and not the individual. Right? That was the answer that he gave me. And I gotta say, having kids, I still consider myself a libertarian entirely, but I do care much more, as a family man now, about the family than the
For sure, me too,
individual. Yeah. It does change you as a person to have children. But the way that a conservative becomes a libertarian is they get arrested. They see the system from the inside. They learn that the cops and the prosecution aren't always the good guys, right? Which is, they have this mental model that they're always good and they don't make mistakes, and they're seeking truth and justice. And the reality is, they're often politically motivated. They're petty. They're just normal humans who make mistakes because that's what humans do. And you start to have more sympathy for the victims of the government, right? And so Trump, so he was just found guilty by a United States government court. Is he going to in a complete show trial of a political sham? And so if he personally feels offended, and again, this is also where that populist energy, which he feeds off of, the more that's there, the more likely you get something, so I think that's all very good. I think it's good that people are angry. I think we want Trump to be angry and vengeful. We want the people to be angry and vengeful, and we want this thing gutted from the inside. And it's maybe I'm dreaming a little bit. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I'm a realist. I'm ultimately a realist, but maybe, just maybe, I don't know, right? It gets me a little bit excited that maybe it could happen. Like 5% of a possibility is still of that would still be incredible.
It's like it's like Dumb and Dumber, with Jim Carrey.
Exactly.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. I'm like squinting. I'm like trying to. I'm like, but you got the fake. And he like said some things, and
got some comments coming in here. Here's nobody at all on Twitter says, when were you arrested, Jeremy? Maybe that's the issue.
I've been arrested.
I was going to say the
SEC
SEC came after you not too long ago.
But I was arrested by the Manchester police for because look, I do believe in part of the Free State movement here. People do libertarian activism. I've been living here for a couple of years, and the police were concerned that there was like an active shooter, or it's not even an active shooter, just someone with a gun who had barricaded himself in this house. Okay, that they wanted him to come out. This was more than a block from my home, and the police had been here for 6 hours. And there's like an L driveway such that like my vehicle couldn't leave the house. And so look, like I would like to leave, and I eventually tried to leave on foot off the back, and they arrested me for trying to leave. There's a video of it because I was like, so it's like I was like, look, I take all the risks, like it's and I was arrested for it. So I have been. I am willing. I don't know. I'm like clearly someone who's more willing to go to the mat on this stuff than the vast majority of people. So I don't know. I don't know where that kind of criticism is like coming from.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a criticism. I think I'm not sure what that was, but
I think that guy's not a fan of me. Yeah.
No? Okay.
Yeah. But to me, there is a stripe of libertarianism that's sort of like wholly against all authority that I think can be very destructive. I think you see some of these people inside the Libertarian Party, and because they have a psychology that's against all hierarchy, all any distance and any relationships, they end up they just constantly tear things down, and they just constantly attack things. And to me, even anarchy is a system of competing voluntary authorities. It's not that authorities won't exist. Police will always exist. I want the police to be privatized and competitive. If you're going to have cities are going to need systems of maintaining order. Like you can get very very no government, no tax type things at sufficient distances. I think if you're talking about an urban environment, I support, again, private government. I'm anti-democracy. The idea that you can do full anarchy at that kind of density, you're going to have authorities that are going to be producing order, hopefully via more economic and aligned means. But there's going to be authorities. And so some of these people are so like, they hate all cops. All cops are evil. No, look, a lot of cops suck. The system kind of sucks. Some of this is necessary. Some of this is going to be there. They go too far.
I think it's a good question for you being a free stater, because there are libertarians out there. I'm not saying they're free staters, but I've heard this before from libertarians where they're in favor of secession. They're all for it, but they're also for open borders. It's like, wait, that doesn't quite compute. If you, everyone who you're seceding from could just come into where you're living then.
Well, people wonder why I touch on some sensitive topics at times, and it's part of why I believe greatly that like there are differences between humans, and it's important to recognize that these differences exist, why they exist, and how they affect the governments and the cultures and all of these things that we get. People are not blank slates. And so this idea that, if New Hampshire were, a libertarian, order, that you could have, 2 million Haitians come into a state with 1 million population and everything would be fine. I think it's crazy. And I think, by the way, literally every, libertarian thought leader, if you look, sort of, there are very good economic arguments for free trade in labor, but even they will be clear about there being needs for national pride and national identity. This idea that and that certain types of immigration could be harmful and could be bad. And so I don't think anyone who goes so far as to say full open borders, nothing at all, I think gets it completely wrong. I think if we want to achieve what we want to achieve in New Hampshire, we need to have systems and mechanisms that can keep the makeup of the population libertarian. This is the founders were incredible people who achieved something amazing. But if there's a single area that I think they got wrong, and how could they have seen this, but now we can see what happened to them, is, well, how does the system evolve? And what happens when you get people with different moral impulses than them interpreting the same exact words? Well, it turns out people with different ethical impulses, with different moral impulses, with different world perspectives can take the set of words, well, we all clearly know what these words mean, and they'll interpret however they want. They'll make up interpretations that make no sense to people like you and me. And so, we libertarians need to not be naive about this. We already saw this fail. And what libertarians need to be more focused on is who are the interpreters? How are we producing the judges, and who are they? Because this is ultimately what your systems are resting on, and this is what you need to be, caring about, and less that we're going to, just write better laws or write better constitutions, and that this software could run on any hardware. It's a crazy idea. It's a foolish notion. It's already been proven not to work.
Yeah. Well, let's pivot off of talking about open borders and the immigration thing, and I want to go back to the election for a minute here, because this was an interesting question here we got from Listen American on YouTube. My fear is that Trump will pick a disaster VP choice. And my guest last week was Cliff Maloney. Cliff Maloney is helping to organize in Pennsylvania to actually, chase ballots and get Republicans to actually do more mail-in ballots and be competitive in that way. He had said, he went on the record, he said, if Nikki Haley is Trump's VP, he will stop doing everything, working for anything to get Trump or any other Republican elected. So what are your thoughts? Do you think there's a chance that Nikki Haley could be the VP? Who do you think the front runner is? And just general thoughts on the VP.
So look, I don't actually follow it with that level of closeness. Cliff, I will say, is a great political operator. He's an example of someone how when you operate well, you get actual influence. And so, when Cliff says things like that, he gets to have actual impact because he gets good Republicans, elected, and he has a deep political network and this kind of thing. And so I think that's an example of doing it the right way if you want to influence those things. I would go with whatever the betting markets are. I think they had some candidates high that I was surprised by. Like they had Doug Burnham really high.
That's who Cliff thinks it'll be, which shocked me. That really surprised me.
Yeah, I only knew that because whenever someone asks me anything, I just look at the betting markets as well, that's my default view, absent more information. If I don't have some opinion already, I just go to them because I think they're more accurate than polls or or anything else. So yeah, I think it was Haley, Burnham, and that
Tim
guy,
Scott.
Tim Scott, but Van, I think Vance is also was high on the markets. Yeah, no, it was a pretty spread market. It wasn't. I don't think anyone was above 25. So it was, the market was not, had not picked a winner. So I don't know. You got to hope it's not Haley. I don't even know that much about Burnham. I know he's a bit, I will say whenever I see someone's a businessman, I do tend to that counts a lot for me because I assume they have a realistic view of the world. It's tough to have too much business success without developing relatively realistic views about the world. But I don't know that you definitely see exceptions to that rule, and I don't know anything
Cuban,
about him specifically. Well, Mark Cuban, I don't know, man. Someone like him, I kind of think at times that he's got a role to play. He's got something he's defending. No, I don't mean like something he's like controlled way. It's the market that he is serving. It's the intellectual defense of things that, does he believe these things in his heart? Could if he's actually this smart guy, does he? Some of the times I see him having these back and forths on some of these DEI topics, I'm like, does he even really believe this, or is he just continuing to do the performance? Sometimes you got to read these things and like, I at that level, it's always like, well, there's what they're saying, and are they also saying something else? And sometimes with him, I'm like, I don't even know.
Well, it's crazy to think that and I think you're onto something there, but it's crazy to think just like someone like Mark Cuban, who's a billionaire, would still be like, sort of being careful with his words, not wanting to offend people. But I think that's the reality of it. Like, he has so much tied up in that market, that credibility of those types of people on the left. They look to Mark Cuban. They want Mark Cuban to, run for president or whatever in 2028. I think there's definitely something to that.
Yeah, I think this idea that billionaires end up being above, public opinion and above, you get to not care, I think is almost always false. I think you actually end up, because so many people, if people are paying attention to you, you have your reputation tied up in all of these things, that actually a lot of billionaires end up feeling very constricted. Having met and talked to some of them privately in my life at times, even heard similar things where, from them. And this is not feel sorry for the billionaires. I mean, they do still get to do
it makes sense, because it's not only them at that point. They own companies and businesses, and if they offend people, then people lose jobs. And I can see how it would happen.
Yeah, and so I mean, someone like Elon Musk, I actually think it's fairly rare to see a billionaire behave that way. It's part of why I think he should ultimately be absolutely regarded as a hero, because a lot of people who are billionaires wouldn't do that. And I think he directionally believes the correct thing on some very important topics, and did actually bear actual risk, reputational and financial risk, to say some of the things that he said and advance some of the things he said. So I versus someone who, just sort of cowers and plays within the system, like a Mark Cuban.
All right. So just a couple more questions here to go back to the Libertarian Party. I mean, you've been very, transparent in, you're a free stater. That's where you're putting your eggs in that basket. And honestly, I'm kind of evolving into that position as thinking that is the best shot for liberty. I don't think I'll move to New Hampshire. My wife hates the cold weather, but I do think free staters have the right idea, because it's all local. I mean, we're not going to change anything federally, but I forget what point I was getting at. I originally wanted to ask you again about the Libertarian Party, but so, being a free stater, being active in the Libertarian Party, you said a lot, free staters, or, the New Hampshire delegation at the convention, all on the same page, with being free staters. Do you think the Libertarian Party, the direction it's going in, which it's kind of like going in two directions. You have the Mises takeover, which has been successful, and you have Angela coming back, and a lot of people in positions of influence. But at the same time, you have your presidential candidate, which is who everyone's going to be looking to, spouting something that goes against more than half of the delegation and probably half of membership supports. So which direction do you think ultimately the Libertarian Party is going to end up going?
Yeah. Well, the party belongs to those who show up, so I would hope that my advice to people who care about the word libertarian and would like to see the Libertarian Party, stay aligned closer to the sort of Mises side of things, which I would consider the right-wing libertarian side of things. I think it's okay to say that. I think rather than both sides claiming to be the true libertarians or whatever, I think they should just admit that this is right and left libertarianism, that this is the axis over which we are struggling. I think that the Mises Caucus should just become a broadly right-wing coalition. It doesn't matter if you don't have to support all of the candidates to be within it. You don't even have to care about the Libertarian Party that much to be in it. Just simply, for not very much money, we could not let these awful people control the Libertarian Party and ruin it, I think is actually the best, and ruin the word libertarian, I think is actually the best pitch for the Libertarian Party. It can't win as a party. And so it's like this idea that you have to continue to be delusional and believe that it's gonna achieve, like, let's give up on that entirely. It is delusional, but we can at least not let the name libertarian be ruined by these awful people. And this is my pitch. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, look, it would also be good if the Mises Caucus people could like do the decentralized, if they're going to do a decentralized revolution, do it for real. Yes, we got to tell people, like you're saying, to get out of bad states and get to better ones. By the way, I'm from Pennsylvania myself before I moved to New Hampshire. So the weather's not that different, especially since you're in Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh versus New Hampshire is actually pretty similar. So I would definitely do the visit. Like everyone should do the visit to New Hampshire and check it out. But even if you move somewhere else, if libertarians can agree that we've got to concentrate, we've got to bunker down, we've got to try to concentrate our political power in ways that we can actually achieve something. That's potentially realistic. So, and certainly in New Hampshire, it's worked. I don't know, that you can do another one of these, right? New Hampshire's got a big head start. It took more than a decade to build out the political machine. You have to go through the system. Like our most advanced people, our House Majority leaders, our candidates who are gonna, win for national office, our candidates who are now getting into the state Senate. It takes time, so that's part of it, this idea that there's going to be a revolution, probably a little bit unrealistic. It might take you 5 years, 10 years to go through the hierarchy of the political party, that you're joining. But that's what people have been doing here to increasing degrees. And it is like objectively working. Actually, you want to hear, this is this is, I don't know if this will be interesting or not, but it might be, and it's not being talked about publicly. It's like a kind of like very narrow but interesting political story that's happening here in New Hampshire. Sure. I haven't talked about this at all. So basically, there's like an internal struggle inside of the New Hampshire Republican Party. Libertarians have like basically conquered the House. Where about half the Republicans are like small L libertarians are like pretty close. And this has been a battle where they both got elected, but also like they've been winning collegially. So like we've seen the like diehard libertarians like bringing more and more of the House members over, where their like voting records have actually improved over time. That weren't as libertarian when they started and weren't free staters and didn't move, but the Senate has been like pretty bad. And so we've had a lot of good legislation get killed in the Senate, and we have one now free state senator in the Senate, but there's like a bunch of free stater. I don't want to say it's free stater, but like there's much more better liberty people who are now like fighting for the Senate. And so you've got this sort of like old money that's like, there's going to be like a very internal struggle inside of the Republican Party, but this is part of the advancement, that's kind of happening here. And it's the work of dozens and dozens of people who are slowly turning the entire thing, libertarian from the inside.
Well, that kind of leads me to my last question here. So, I mean, it's hard to predict, but with making that progress, with, getting close to taking over the House and starting to make some progress in the Senate, the battle lines are drawn. Like, what do you think a realistic time frame would be for, a potential free state for secession?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you push secession hard. It's a very good strategic tactic. I think experientially, like nullification and secession are roughly the same. And so the key strategic goal is to achieve the first actual aspect of nullification, like not just on paper nullification, because we have some of those where, federal agents, can't do this and that in New Hampshire territory, and the state government can't cooperate. And I think this stuff is like all very good and it's great, and some states don't have it. And it is, I'm sure, real. But like, what what's an area where you could show that like an entire category of federal law does not apply in the region of New Hampshire in a de facto sense?
Mhm.
Uh, marijuana and actually sanctuary cities are two of the better examples of sort of de facto nullification or in some of federal law in sort of the last decade or two. And so New Hampshire finding the right category, ideally the one most beneficial to keeping it. You're always every victory should keep, you're using them to get more. And so where could we nullify an area of law that's actually feasible and that could advance us? But that's like, if we can get, that's the next step down that road, right?
Mhm.
And the more we have the big brains and the operators coming to New Hampshire and making all this stuff happen, I mean, it takes it's an incredible amount of people that make it happen, and there's so many roles for people to play.
Well, that's exciting, man. And I mean, it's very different from what you see in other parts of the liberty movement within the Libertarian Party, where you don't see these, clear goals set out to really chart that vision, which I think is really important with making any kind of progress. What gets measured gets managed. I don't know who said that, but it's correct. We're about out of time here, Jeremy. So if you want to give your plugs, whatever you got, whatever you want to point people towards.
Sure. I'm mostly active on Twitter. You can follow me at my full name, Jeremy Kaufman, Kauffman. Anyone who's ever interested in coming to New Hampshire, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Free State Project also employs people to do that. So think of them as like a tour guide or a real estate guide. And I recommend that everyone visit, come out to PorcFest, that kind of thing. And just, you don't have to be sold on anything. It's just worth experiencing. And so I think that's something everyone should do, at least once or twice.
All right. The always entertaining Jeremy Kaufman. Thanks for coming on Find Your Freedom, man. This was fun.
Cheers.
All right, guys, that is a wrap for today's show. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We had a bunch of people watching live and commenting. So next time we go live, be sure to get in on the action. Set your notifications on YouTube or Rumble or Twitter to be sure that you're notified when we do go live. And if you like what we're doing, if you like what Brian and I are doing with Finding Freedom and with his show, Mean Age Daydream, please, you can support us in other ways too. You can become a patron over at Patreon or on Locals. And we've launched some new features recently. We have our new Telegram channel, as well as a Telegram group for Pride members, which it's turning into a pretty good time. We're getting more people in there, and that'll continue to grow. So we had to abandon the Facebook groups. They're just so terrible and awful that we switched over to Telegram. So sure to check that out if you want more content. Of course, we have our bonus content. We'll be getting back to Degenerate Gamblers here in a few months, our bonus show that I know a lot of people like. So look for that. We'll have another conspiracy or secrets, lies, and cover-ups coming up, our conspiracy bonus show. So join the Pride to get all of that. And with that being said, I'll be back next week with another awesome guest. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.